Today, we're going to talk about contracts and how contracts work and what we need to be looking for in a contract regarding dates. We have a lot of new addendums like GG. Now, people that are listening going, what the heck is GG? And some of the realtors are probably like, what is GG?
The most important thing about the contract is that time is of the essence. A lot of other states don't operate like that, meaning when there is a date or a deadline, that is important, and there are ramifications if it's passed.
When it comes to a contract, there's all the check boxes: FHA addendum, condo addendum, homeowner's right addendum. There's all these different addendums. And when does the contract not become fully effective? When missing some of these addendums. That is something that's very important to understand when talking about the effectiveness of a contract. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Making Money with Laura Sanders, and I am Laura Sanders. Every week, we talk about something to help you make a little money, save a little money, or maybe just help you navigate this crazy world that we live in. And oh my goodness, as I say every week, it is crazy. Today, we're going to talk about contracts and how contracts work and what we need to be looking for in a contract regarding dates. How does it work with a holiday? What time does it end? What time does the buyer have till? Is it 5 o'clock? Is it 12 o'clock? What time is it? And with me today is Nick Fiorello with JK Closing Attorneys to help discuss the legalities of the contract. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here today. So today we're doing a little different. You're in your office in the car. I'm in my office. Well, this isn't really my office. This is my team's office. And we got a lot of stuff. We got boards, things going on. So, you and I talk all the time about the contract. So I think that some people get a little confused. We have a lot of new addendums like GG. Now, people that are listening going, what the heck is GG? And some of the realtors are probably like, what is GG? Tell us what you think about the contract and what is important for people to know.
Well, definitely, time is a huge thing. And right now it's something that I keep seeing because we had a holiday recently. We had Memorial Day. We have a couple holidays coming up. We have Juneteenth, which is next Friday. And that's a nationally recognized holiday now. And we also have July 4th coming up. July 4th happens to be a Saturday, so it's not that big of a deal. But in terms of Memorial Day was a Monday. And now Juneteenth is a Friday. So I wanted to talk about this because it's something that I'm getting questions on, I would say 3 to 4 to 5 times a day. And it has to do with all about time. If you have, well, let me backtrack. The most important thing about the contract is that time is of the essence. A lot of other states don't operate like that, meaning when there is a date or a deadline, that is important, and there are ramifications if it's passed. All of those dates and deadlines must be followed and adhered to. So you can think of it as strict compliance with the deadlines. So that's number one. That's first and foremost. Number two, we were talking about weekends and holidays. That's another big topic because if a deadline, for the most part, like 99% of the deadlines in the contract, there is one that doesn't apply. But all deadlines, if they land on a Saturday, Sunday, or a national legally recognized holiday, then that deadline will get moved to the next day, which is not a Saturday, Sunday, or nationally legalized holiday or a business day. So if you think about it, we have a lot of people that aren't necessarily realizing that Juneteenth is a nationally recognized holiday. It's new. It's from the last couple of years. It's not something that's been established for forever. It's a newer holiday. So over the last couple of years, I think it was the last 2 or 3 where it's been, become official that it's a national holiday, meaning banks are closed in observance of the holiday. Then a lot of closings can't happen, and a lot of other deadlines get pushed to the next day, which is not the national holiday or weekend or anything else. So next business day. So we have deadlines that are falling next Friday on Juneteenth. Obviously, they can't move to Saturday. They can't move to
Right.
Sunday. So the next day that's not one of those days would be Monday. So, you and I have a deal right now, and that's one of the things that came up. It just happens. So we are putting the closing
So
date
they
to the
wanted to
following
push,
Monday.
but they actually wanted to do it the day before. I saw some kind of an email. So that would require an addendum. When it comes to a contract, there's all the check boxes, right? FHA addendum, condo addendum, homeowners right addendum. There's all these different addendums. And when does the contract not become fully effective? When missing some of these addendums. That is something that's very important to understand when talking about the effectiveness of a contract and becoming effective, and when the dates start
Yeah,
counting.
so for sure. So the effective date of the contract, that's another thing I wanted to talk about. That's when the last party that we're waiting on has signed or initialed and delivered that offer or counteroffer. The argument that I always make is if the actual contract is signed, countersigned, and delivered, and some of the addenda are not fully initialed or anything, the intent of the parties was to go under contract. So the effective date would be when that main contract was exchanged between the parties and delivered to both sides. So if you have a initial missing on one of the ancillary riders, then I would argue that the effective date was when the contract was delivered, not when that's signed 2 days later or initialed 2 days later. Because the intent of the parties was to go under contract and send it. Just because they missed an initial on, one of these riders doesn't mean the crux of the agreement hasn't already been, agreed upon and entered into. So when that happens, we get the contract. The effective date is that date, and that is effectively day zero of the counting. Then you start your counting. The next day would be day one, day two, day three, and so on. And then when we were just talking about right before I cut out was the weekends and holidays. So when you fall on a weekend, a deadline, let's say you will go under contract today, for example, today's Wednesday, you have today's day zero, you have a deposit due in 3 days. That means tomorrow's day one, Thursday, Friday's day two, Saturday's day three. That means it cannot fall on that Saturday, meaning it is due on the next day that's not a weekend, which would be not Sunday, but Monday. So the deposit, effectively, you have more than 3 days. You have 5 days because it's due if the deadline falls on a Saturday, which gets pushed to Monday. What I was referring to before is that there's the one date that doesn't follow the fall on the holiday weekend structure is when a contract is accepted. You can have an effective date on one of those days. So if you go under contract on Juneteenth, a lot of realtors are going to be working that day. It's a day where a lot of people are off. They get a heads up on the weekend for showing property. I'm sure there's going to be contracts entered into. That is an effective date if a contract is entered into properly that day.
That's a very good point to say.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the acceptance of a contract can happen on any day. So that's why I said that, pretty much 99.9% of the deadlines, if they fall on a weekend, get pushed. But a deadline for an acceptance or if you go under contract go under contract on a weekend or a holiday, those both apply. So for the most part, they get pushed except for acceptance.
I do have a question though. So I know
Yes.
that the contract reads in calendar days. Now, some contracts will read in business days. Now, for the purpose of mortgage loan commitment, right? Do we count Saturday or do we not count Saturday when we are doing business days?
It depends. So when you have a typical contract and the loan approval period is designated in that contract as, let's say it's 30 days, which is the standard that's included in there, you're counting all days, all calendar days. Everything goes by calendar days, unless it's distinguished in the contract. So the as is regular,
It
the
says
as
business,
is
right?
contract.
Right, but what if like a
What was
realtor
it?
changes it and says what if a realtor changes it and says we're going to count these as business days, right? Not calendar days. Now, in the mortgage industry, Saturday is considered a business day.
But not in the real estate industry and the rest of the industries. There has to be specifically clarified that Saturday would be included as a business day
Even though
for
it's the
that to
mortgage
apply
commitment.
as a business day, even though it's a
Okay.
mortgage commitment, because the mortgage company or the lender is not a party to the contract. The party to the contracts are the buyers and the sellers. So buyers and sellers and the reasonable public people are going to acknowledge business days are Monday through Friday. So just because the lenders don't use Saturday as a weekend doesn't mean that it's not generally accepted as a weekend. So I would argue and I would advise that that needs to be specifically included in writing, that if that's going to be included as a weekday.
Okay. That that's a good explanation. Only just because, in another life I was a mortgage broker and that was a trick question all the time. So,
I'm sure.
um so I've had though in the past where you've told me that if the addendum wasn't signed, that it could not be effective. When in that case would that be? And I know
I
you
like
like to
to
always
say
add
that
an
if it's
addendum. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I like to say that if it's something crucial, like where it's a condo rider or the HOA rider that's, very important to the contract, not a random disclosure, but something that has been negotiated between the parties. And these association riders, that's a very large part of the contract. You have special assessments that are discussed and negotiated. You have all these different aspects that are discussed and negotiated, and that's part of the meat of the contract. When you have a random licensee disclosure where it's just stating, hey, buyer has a real estate license and they're disclosing it to you, or disclosure that it's some lead-based paint disclosure that was supposed to be initialed and wasn't initialed properly, that's missing one initial. How can you argue that the terms of the contract haven't been agreed upon and entered into when you have the whole contract at that point, just because that's a random disclosure? But when you have an addendum or a rider where there's crucial information that goes with the contract and is negotiated and is part of that contract, then there's a different argument there. So there, you're right where there's different circumstances, but it has to do with what was negotiated and agreed upon. A random disclosure isn't part of that. That's just something that has to be thrown in for a type of
Like what date?
transaction, if you're exactly. So then it's not something that's contemplated between the parties as part of the agreement. It's just something that has to be thrown in there to be in compliance. So that would be, my point on that.
Okay. Well, we're going to go to commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what time and how do you cancel a contract. So you're in the last day of your inspection period. What do you do next? Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
All roads lead home with Fairway Home Mortgage. When it comes to home financing, who you work with matters. At Fairway Home Mortgage, we combine the strength of a national lender with the care and accessibility of local mortgage experts. We offer a wide range of home financing solutions, personalized guidance, and a streamlined process designed to keep things simple, from application to closing. Because at Fairway, home isn't just what we finance, it's what drives everything we do. Connect with Cliff Bernstein, Branch Manager, NMLS number 7853 at 561-213-6852 to see what your options are today. Company NMLS number 2289. This is not an offer to enter into an agreement. Not all customers will qualify. Subject to underwriting approval, other terms and conditions may apply. Equal housing opportunity. Loan officer NMLS number 7853.
At JK Closing Attorneys, we do all of the same things that a title company does, but with the benefits of being a law office. We can help with residential real estate, short sales, commercial real estate, refinances, 1031 exchanges, and FRIPTA withholding.
Contact JK Closing Attorneys today at 954-332-3111. Again, that is 954-332-3111.
Priority One Credit Union of Florida is a welcoming credit union that makes your financial success our number one priority. We offer lower loan rates, higher deposit rates, and common sense local loan approvals, with nationwide access through shared branching.
Hi, I'm Dina Hennessy, President and CEO at Priority One Credit Union. We are open to the community. Anyone can be a member of our credit union, and we would love to have you.
Contact us today at 954-335-5100. You can also reach us at PriorityOneFL.org. Your financial success is our priority. That's 954-335-5100.
Everyone, and welcome back to Making Money with Laura Sanders. And I am here with Nick Fiorello from JK Closing Attorneys, and we're talking about how to not get stuck in a contract or lose your deposit without knowing how the time frames work. For instance, you're my client and you say to me on the last day of inspections, and this happens all the time, either I want these repairs, if I don't get these repairs, cancel the contract. Or they say, I want these repairs, but they don't say cancel the contract. So how do you handle that?
The contract's is very specific as to what to include in writing for different time periods and deadlines. You, as a buyer, are under more scrutiny with deadlines because there's a loan approval period and there's an inspection period. If you get to the end of the inspection period, let's say it's today, we're going to use today's as our example. Today's Wednesday the 10th. The inspection period was 7 days. It ends today. That means it ends at 12 o'clock tonight. So you have until 11:59 and 59 seconds, which I wouldn't wait until that time to give notice, but you have to provide written notice as a buyer or buyer's agent on behalf of the buyer or buyer's attorney on behalf of the buyer. The buyer needs to provide written notice to the seller indicating that they are terminating the contract within the inspection period. They can terminate for whatever reason. If they have bad juju, they don't want to move forward for whatever reason. I just had a client that was, I had to explain that to because the buyer went to apply to the association and didn't like the association and then just terminated the contract.
We need to look at when it comes to timeframes. So if you want to get repairs done and you want to cancel the contract, you're going to have to ask for the contract repairs in your email, and in a separate sentence say that if we're not able to come to some sort of agreement, please accept this as our release and cancellation of contract and send the cancellation addendum with your client's signature. And saying, you can also say in there, listen, it's not our intentions to want to cancel the contract. However, if we can't come to an agreement, I am protecting my client's deposit by sending this release and cancellation.
You can always reinstate a contract too. So as a buyer's agent or as a buyer, you want to protect your deposit, you want to protect their deposit, you want to protect them. So if the seller is traveling, which I've had one recently where the seller was traveling and they weren't able to answer whether they wanted to give the credit or not, or they wanted to proceed, or, they couldn't give any answers. So then I advise the buyer, if you want to protect your deposit and you want to protect the ability, to retain that deposit, you need to put something in writing stating that you terminate the contract. Whether that seller wants to negotiate with you after and reinstate the contract, that can be, and it's not necessarily a big deal because all the terms and conditions of the contract that were previously agreed upon can be incorporated in this new contract that's reinstated, and you just move forward and all the searches have been done and everything. So That's something that can always happen. But at the same time, and on the same token, that buyer's protected and they won't lose their deposit, or they won't get stuck in a fight battling over their deposit for no reason, just because the seller was traveling or was unavailable, or, this, that, or the other. But it's very important to put in writing, specifically the buyer or the buyer themselves, I am terminating this contract pursuant to the inspection period, and please accept this as termination. Please see the assigned, our release and cancellation that's been signed and attached here to. Please sign and return it. The email alone is strong enough. You don't need that release and cancellation with the inspection period. The email alone needs to have the proper verbiage to move forward.
Well, but here's my other thing. So some realtors at 11:59 send an email out saying that we would like X, Y, and Z repaired. Now, it's 11:59, so we have not responded, right? The next day comes, and they say, did you see my email requesting X, Y, and Z to be done? Yes, I did, but the seller's not willing to do it. Okay, well, we're going to cancel the contract. They think that by them just telling you they want something, that extends the discussion.
That's incorrect. And they're putting their client's deposit at risk and the whole transaction at risk. But then it becomes a leveraging point for the seller that, they can say, oh, we'll give you this, that, and the other, but you have to make your deposit go hard. You have to take away this contingency or that contingency. So it becomes a leveraging point for the seller. Not everybody wants to necessarily go after a deposit. They want to close. That's why they go under contract. But ultimately, sometimes that's the only recourse that they have, and they hold the buyer's deposit up. I saw one that was held up for 2.5 years, $10,000. They still sold the house, but then the seller was still placing a claim on the buyer's deposit from a previous contract, and it was up in dispute for like 2.5 years.
And how did that one play out in the end for you? Do you know?
The closing agent, I represented the seller. The closing agent reached out because they were holding this money in escrow, and they said, hey, we're going to throw this in the interpleader if we don't, hear from the parties. We put the seller and the buyer in contact directly which is what they wanted to do. And they resolved it. The seller ended up taking a portion of it, and the buyer took the rest, and everybody walked away happy. But it was $10,000 that was held up for 2.5 years.
Right.
Yeah,
That's a long
exactly.
time. But the title company is not allowed to release it. So what is a good number and a good email for people to reach out to you at JK Closings or to JK Closings if they're looking for a top closing agent?
It would be 954-779-5000. That's our office line. And you can email myself at nick@jkclosings.com, or our legal department, if I'm not available, at legal@jkclosings.com.
Great. And if you're looking for a top realtor, someone that can help you stage your home, show your home in the best light possible. And I do have to say, I had someone recently take all of my information, hire every single person, and then use another realtor. Found out from somebody else that they were like, I made a mistake. I should have used Laura. Their house took 9 months to sell, because you can't bits and piece it together. I'm the one that knows how to intertwine it all. But again, Laura Sanders, RE/MAX Direct, 954-650-0827, lauracell.com. And until next week, let's make it a great one.